second chapter, 18th verse. Param param Vaishnavam amantijat yadneti netyatad adarksharaha yadneti netyatad udashishikshvaha Vishrijaya Doratmana Mananya Sohrida Vishrijaya Doratmainyam Mananya Sohadra Pradopaguyariha Padam Pade Pade Param Param Vaishnavama Manantad Yaneti Natyatar Utshikshavaha Vishrija Duradmamyam Ananya Suhridaha Rido Pagura Yarya Padam Pade Pade Padam, the Supreme. Padam, situation. Vaishnavam, in relation with the personality of Godhead. Amananti, do they know? Tat, that. Yat, which. Na iti, not this. Na iti, not this. Iti, thus. Atat, godless. Uchikshavaha, those who desire to avoid. Vistrijya, giving it up completely. Duradmyam, perplexities. Ananya, absolutely. So hridaha, in goodwill. Hrida upaguya, taking them into his heart. Ariha, that which is only worshipable. Param, lotus feet. Pade pade, at every moment. Translation. The transcendentalists desire to avoid everything godless. The transcendentalists desire to avoid everything godless, for they know that supreme situation in which everything is related with the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Therefore, a pure devotee who is in absolute harmony with the Lord does not create perplexities, but worships the lotus feet of the Lord at every moment, taking them into his heart responsively. The transcendentalists desire to avoid everything godless, for they know that supreme situation in which everything is related with the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Everything is related with the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Therefore, a pure devotee who is in absolute harmony with the Lord does not create perplexities, but worships the lotus feet of the Lord at every moment, taking them into his heart. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In the Bhagavad Gita, Mat Dhamma, my abode, is mentioned several times, and according to the version of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, there exists the unlimited spiritual sky, wherein the planets are called Vaikunthas, or the abode of the Personality of Godhead. In that sky, which is far, far beyond the material sky and its sevenfold coverings, there is no need of the sun or the moon, nor is there necessity of electricity for illumination, because the planets are self-illuminating and more brilliant than the material suns. Pure devotees of the Lord are absolutely in harmony with the personality of Godhead, or in other words, they always think of the Lord as their only dependable friend and well-wisher. They do not care for any mundane creature, up to the status of Brahma, the Lord of the universe. Only they can definitely have a clear vision of the Vaikuntha planets. Such pure devotees being perfectly directed by the Supreme Lord, do not create any artificial perplexity in the matter of transcendental understanding by wasting time in discussing what is Brahman and what is non-Brahman or Maya. Nor do they falsely think of themselves as one with the Lord, or argue that there is no existence of the Lord separately, or that there is no God at all, or that living beings are themselves God, or that when God incarnates himself, he assumes a material body. Nor do they concern themselves with the many obscure speculative theories, which are, in actuality, so many stumbling blocks on the path of transcendental understanding. Apart from the class of impersonalists or non-devotees, there are also classes who pose themselves as devotees of the Lord, but at heart maintain the idea of salvation by becoming one with the impersonal Brahman. The idea of salvation by becoming one with the impersonal Brahman. They wrongly manufacture their own way of devotional service by open debauchery and mislead others who are simpletons or debauchees like themselves. All these non-devotees and debauchees are, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti, duratmas, or crooked souls in the dress of Mahatmas, or great souls. Such non-devotees and debauchees are completely excluded from the list of transcendentalists by the presentation of this particular verse by Shukadeva Goswami. As the Vaikuntha planets are factually the supreme residential places called the Param Padam, so the Vaikuntha planets are factually the supreme residential places called Param Padam. The impersonal Brahmajyoti is also called the Param Padam due to its being the rays of the Vaikuntha planets, as the sun rays are the rays of the sun. In the Bhagavad Gita 14:27, it is clearly said that the impersonal Brahmajyoti rests on the person of the Lord. And because everything rests on the Brahmajyoti directly and indirectly, everything is generated from the Lord. Everything rests on him, and after annihilation, everything is merged in him only. Therefore, nothing is independent of him. A pure devotee of the Lord no longer wastes valuable time in discriminating the Brahman from the non-Brahman, because he knows perfectly well that the Lord, Param Brahman, by his Brahman energy, is interwoven in everything, and thus everything is looked upon by a devotee as the property of the Lord. The devotee tries to engage everything in his service, and does not create perplexities by falsely lording it over the creation of the Lord. He is so faithful that he engages himself, as well as everything else, in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. In everything, the devotee sees the Lord, and he sees everything in the Lord. The specific disturbance created by a duratma, or crooked soul, is due to his maintaining that the transcendental form of the Lord is something material. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langayate girim yat kripatarham bande Shri Guru Dinatarane. The verse again. The transcendentalists desire to avoid everything godless, for they know that supreme situation in which everything is related with the Lord, the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Therefore, a pure devotee who is in absolute harmony with the Lord does not create perplexities, but worships the lotus feet of the Lord at every moment, taking them into his heart. In the purport, it's indicated that there's always a struggle between the transcendentalists or impersonalists and the devotees. Prabhupada characterizes the impersonalists as non-devotees, and sometimes even as demons. Although it is a step in the right direction to obtain the impersonal realization or liberation of the Supreme Lord. But it's always a fight. Krishna had to fight against many demons when he was present on the earth. There was even a plot to murder Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And of course there was the Duryodhana and his mob, who were intent upon regaining the kingdom to fight to the death over the right to have their kingdom, as was their father, very dedicated to wanting to be the king. So he was allowing or hoping that his sons would be victorious. So Prabhupada is indicating here that there's always a fight. There's the fight with Maya, there's the fight with the demons, there's the fight with impersonalists. Even though most of the people who profess religiosity, whether they're Hindus or Jews or Mohammedans or whatever they are, Buddhists, they tend to think that the highest form of realization is to merge or to be one with God. And therefore that struggle always exists. And as Prabhupada has indicated many times, there's always a struggle eternally between the impersonalists and the Vaishnavas. The Vaishnavas adore the personal nature of God. And it's said somewhere, I think in the Nectar of Devotion, that impersonal realization multiplied by 1,000 or 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 times is very insignificant in comparison to one drop of the nectar of devotion of a person who is dedicated to the personality of Godhead, to devotional service. So devotional service is considered to be the highest form of realization. It's said in the Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami writes that that Krishna is even attracted by devotional service. Even though he's the most attractive person, devotional service attracts even him. So the idea of becoming liberated it's a bit of a lulling oneself into a false sense of security, that we can become liberated. And I think in one place Prabhupada talks about the difference between entering the kingdom of God and the palace of the king and entering into the personal association with the king. There's a difference. One can enter the kingdom of God or the impersonal Brahma Jyoti, but one can't enter the palace of the king or enter into a personal relationship with Krishna. That is very difficult. Prabhupada uses the word liberation kind of liberally as to have a bit of a play on words, but at the same time, even though he thought that the political system of democracy was, as he called it, demon crazy, he took advantage of a lot of the facilities that were afforded to him in the United States. It's the place where he began to produce many books, and he even mentioned in one of his lectures that people sometimes criticize us for using cars and airplanes and computers and telephones when we're preaching against all this materialistic sort of advancement. And because there's a lot of appreciation and a lot of glittering sort of attraction to advances in medicine and travel and in communication, telephones, and we can extend a person's life for another 10 or 20 or 30 years sometimes through medicine or operations. And we can fly to the other side of the world in just a few hours, and we can speak to people on the other side of the world just by the push of a button. We're very enamored by all these so-called advances, and I think Prabhupada uses the word glittering sometimes. It seems to be very fascinating that we're very attached to all these things. There's even a form of milk where it's subjected, I just read about this, to pressure that's equal to being under the ocean 60 kilometers. I don't even think there's such a thing as a 60-kilometer depth of the ocean. But anyway, it's subjected to great pressure, the milk is, and it's in containers, and it's advertised, it's on the shelves now in supermarkets here as non-pasteurized and non-homogenized and raw. And so you can actually purchase raw milk in supermarkets and drink it. It's legal if you buy into this concept of high pressure industrialization. And the machines that create this high pressure are so large, I saw pictures of them, that they're as big as 2 or 3 automobiles. So that's being marketed now as, being good for you. Milk, it's called cold pressed milk. If you want to try some, you can go into Kohl's and get it. It's selling for something like $5 or $6 per liter and a half. So Prabhupada was very liberal in the use of the word liberation. He said that even a person, and it's written in the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that if a person becomes a pure devotee, that person's ancestors are, for previous generations, up to 12, up to 50, sometimes it's said, generations previously are liberated. So what is liberation? I mean, it's not necessarily perfection of life liberation. Confirmed. Some of you have probably seen this picture, maybe you've even seen the actual image of the actual thing called the Statue of Liberty. And there was when I was in school, when I was about 17 years old, we had to learn this phrase, liberté, égalité, and fraternity, which means freedom, equality, and brotherhood. It's kind of a French thing. And it was the French government that gave this statue, called the Statue of Liberty, to the people of the United States. And it's resting in New York Harbor. It's got its own little island called Liberty Island, and it's something like 400 tons of copper, and it's something like 63 meters in height, and it is made out of copper, but it's hollow, and you can go. I've never done it. I've never even been there, but you can apparently go inside up a spiral stairway and go to the very top, the crown of this goddess, which was a Roman goddess called Liberté or something like that, robed in a robe, and she's holding this big torch. It's like the torch of liberty, but apparently one can go up this spiral stairway inside, and out of the crown, which has windows or peek holes, you can stick your head out. I think one of the president's wives went in there, and President of the United States went in there and poked her head out of the top. So it's become a kind of an iconic symbol of freedom. And the French people, they donated this because they also believed, I don't know if they do it now, but they believed in democracy and freedom. When I was 16, we had to read this book called Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. It was all about democracy, because there were a lot of revolutions in that country, in France, and they're kind of rebellious. And about 5 years ago, there was an incident where there was a satirical magazine in Paris which made drawings of these people were exercising their so-called right to freedom of expression. And in this place, I think it was called Hebdo or Charlie Hebdo or something like that, they were making illustrations of Muhammad that were sort of deprecating. They made him look foolish and stupid, and so these Mohammedan terrorists entered the shop and murdered about 12 people. So they kind of got their comeuppance, you might say, for participating in a form of spiritual pornography. Of course, what they did, these terrorists, was definitely wrong and against the law, and I think they were killed eventually. But these people were trying to exercise their freedom. And when I was in school, I read a couple of books by the French existential novelist Albert Camus, and he was noted for saying that your freedom ends where the next man's nose begins. So even though the French people liked freedom and they thought it was a great thing, they realized that it had its limits, and nowadays it's more apparent than ever that democracy does have its limits. When Disneyland was planning to open a branch somewhere in France, I think in Paris, there was a great protest against this form of entertainment. But eventually, the Disney people won out, and I think it's operating now inside that area. So if you're into enjoying things, you can go to Florida or Southern California and see Disney World or Disneyland, or go to Paris and see their Walt Disney things, whatever they are. So Prabhupada was very, he said in a few places that we are the greatest opportunists. We'll take advantage, even though there's a lot of things wrong in a democratic state, and a monarchical sort of regime has a lot more advantages. He did take advantages of these things in producing books and doing a lot, and starting the Hare Krishna movement, actually. It started in the United States. I have to confess I'm one of the ugly Americans. It's still there. But there was some advantage of it. And it was interesting that I think it was in Sao Paulo about 30 years ago, there was a conference put on by devotees to say, it was a kind of environmental thing, to say that the devotees don't harm living beings, including all the living beings in the air and in the ground, and they're environmentally very friendly. And there was some criticism by some of the participants. They came from all different parts of Brazil and different parts of the world. That here you are saying you're environmentally friendly, and yet you promoted bringing us here in cars and airplanes, and you use all this technological stuff, and yet you preach against it. How is that possible? And it was explained by devotees. Prabhupada wasn't there. It was explained by devotees, the principle of yukta vairagya, that you can actually use everything, just about everything, I mean not envy of course, but just about everything in the service of Krishna, and it becomes purified, whether it's an airplane or a computer or a car or whatever it is. So this is a philosophy that has sort of won over a lot of people. Of course, most people in the world are impersonalists, and they think that we're weird or something like that. But the concept of doing everything for God, everything can be used in Krishna's service, is a principle. And there's a group I think they're in Pennsylvania, they're nearby the Gita Nagari farm, a community that uses technology, but they limit it. And they say that you can't make phone calls if you're in their community, but they do use tractors and things like that in their settlements. So it's because there's not a philosophy of yukta vairagya that's pervasive in these communities. They just have to sort of take it, each thing on an ad hoc basis. Well, we don't use tractors or cars, but in some cases we will use them, but we have to be careful not to get attached to them, and so on and so forth. But anyway, there's a lot to learn from all these different people, these different communities. And Prabhupada has said that, he's told us that it doesn't matter what we are, what communities we're in, or what religions we follow, or what age we are, or what gender we are, but we can serve Krishna from any position, and that's devotional service. Devotional service is very powerful. It's said that devotional service is so powerful that it can counteract more sinful activities than we can actually commit. And it's also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that in the 18th chapter that He'll protect us from all sinful reactions. Not everybody, but those who engage in devotional service are automatically protected. There was a time when I think I was about 9. No, I was older than that, maybe 20 years old, when some devotees visited a Catholic school in Southern California called Mary, Mother of the Sea. And one of the priests asked us to visit him in his chambers after the class. And it was a kind of an interesting class because a lot of the teachers who were nuns and priests came to the class, and there were probably about 40 people in the class. They were very interested to see what the Hare Krishnas were up to. Anyway, this priest talked to us, and his question was that in my profession, I see many people come and confess in the confession box, They're probably Roman Catholics. And I see these same people come back week after week confessing for the same sins, and I just think this whole idea of I'm having doubts about this whole idea of confession, if it's really working. I mean, and then we tried to explain that actually you have to remove the desire for sins, and the prayaschita or atonement isn't necessarily the cure. And he liked that very much, but he didn't say much, but obviously he was very, very pleased with what we said. So on the way back, and then he gave us a sealed envelope before we left, which we didn't open in front of him. But on the way back, we opened it up, and there was $50 inside there. He was so impressed by our idea of removing sinful desire from the heart that he gave us this money out of his own pocket, more or less, or the church's or the school's treasury. Anyway, it was just showing that some of the philosophies are not necessarily complete or perfect or thorough. They work, but they have their limitations. So this is an instance of finding that if people don't have a full knowledge, a comprehensive knowledge of who God is and how to attain Him, that they sometimes, even people who are in a high position, are sometimes bewildered, like this man was. And now he probably continued to be whatever he was doing, a priest or something like that. But he understood that something was very good. And I think Prabhupada, when he spoke to a group in, I think it was Melbourne, St. Francis Monastery, one of the brothers asked him in the question period, well, what do you think of St. Francis? And Prabhupada asked the brother, well, what is his philosophy? And the answer was kind of vague, and how he loved animals and birds and insects, and he wouldn't kill anyone. And Prabhupada reported by saying, that is God consciousness. That is God consciousness. And another brother asked him once, he said, well, what do you think of Jesus Christ? And without even hesitating, Prabhupada answered him, he is our guru. And I thought that was a very brilliant answer, because we don't just have one guru, we have many gurus, Diksha gurus, Pradarshika gurus, Shiksha gurus, and so on. So why not? Christ can be one of our gurus. So I think we'll end there, and if you have any comments or questions, fire away. Stand or raise hands or whatever. If not, I'll stop. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I have a question. You're speaking about the Statue of Liberty, and I'm just wondering if you know on what basis the U.S. government they established these principles of liberty and freedom. Was it on the Christian church, or did they just create a doctrine within their constitution?
Well, from what I know, one of the constitutional amendments says that you have a right to carry firearms. I mean, I could be wrong, but people do believe that they have a right to carry firearms. And someone recently told me on good authority that 70% of the American public believe that they shouldn't be allowed to carry firearms. But the gun lobby is so powerful that even though the vast majority carrying pistols and rifles, they lose, because the lobbyists are so powerful. So they do have, and I think the formation of the U.S. government was kind of based on violence. They had the Revolutionary War. They stopped being a colony of Britain with gunfire, and when lots of gunfire, and they won the war. And then the heads of the Mormon Church were actually Hiram Smith and Joseph Smith were murdered by a vigilante group. They were murdered with rifles in a public place. So it's kind of a violent country. It's based on what they call democracy, that everyone has the right to bear arms and say whatever they want to say. But in courts of law, there's limitations, like if you shout fire in a crowded movie theater, that would be against the law, even though you technically do have the right to say anything, anywhere, to anyone. So there are limitations to democracy.
I don't remember exactly where I heard it, but I think he said he's a Shakya Avatar also. But maybe I need a more authoritative source. I don't remember at all where I heard it. So.
There's a lot of untruth flying around in the ether. We call it prajalpa. So you can't always believe what you read in the newspapers or what people say. It's just part of life. There's truth and there's falsity, and sometimes it's difficult or impossible to distinguish between the two. Yes.
There's a reference in Corners' Great Transcendental Adventure where Prabhupada's giving a talk in Melbourne in 1974. And he says, my Guru Maharaj had great respect for Muhammad and Jesus Christ.
Thank you. I think if you read everything that Prabhupada wrote or said in books or on the Veda base, you'll find that he was very ecumenical. I mean, he was very appreciative and accommodating to people of all ages and faiths and genders and colors and so forth and so on. But if we take one sentence out of the books or from a recorded lecture, we can mislead ourselves and other people, because it's not intellectually honest to do that. I mean, it's a great fault that it's one of my pet peeves, but it's not a good way of getting at the truth. And there's a saying that absorbing the truth is kind of like picking blackberries. If you go at it from only one angle, you'll miss something. Something like that. I don't know the exact quote, but that someone put that on the web, and I read it somewhere. So I think we have time for maybe one more.
Just a comment on from the way of critiquing Muhammad. You could say something about Krishna. Krishna also killed many demons that were opposed to Krishna consciousness. Many millions and millions. There was wars for. So to use that logic that Muhammad was killing for the cause of spreading God consciousness. It's done in all religions, in a sense.
I think that etymologists or linguists can find out that the word jihad that means not so much fighting against infidels, but fighting against wrong, against maya, against illicit activity. I think that's one of the meanings of jihad. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Oh, that's Mukunda Maharaj.